back to Nerd and Geek University. This is day 3 of Dragons of Tarkir Spoilers. Let's get started. The first of the cons of Tarkir Spoilers that we're going to talk about today is Aven Sunstriker. Aven Sunstriker is a bird warrior creature that costs 2 white and 1 colorless mana for a 1/1 flyer with double strike. The card also has the new Megamorph mechanic, meaning you can cast it face down for 3 colorless mana and flip it over for its Megamorph cost, which is 1 white and 4 colorless mana. When the Sunstriker is flipped face up, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it, making you a better attacker or blocker. Aven Sunstriker is amazing for Limited, as Flying and Double Strike are both excellent mechanics in Limited that'll help win you games when combined with the bolster mechanic on cards like Sandcrafter Mage. The card could also see some standard play with Blue-White Heroic with cards like Phalanx Leader as well. I wouldn't expect this card to see much play outside of Limited or Standard, but it could be used in either Warrior or Bird-themed decks in Commander or Modern. The next card that we're going to talk about for spoilers is Gadul Lurker. Gadul Lurker costs 1 blue mana for a 1/1 salamander creature that can't be blocked. Like other cards with the Megamorph mechanic, you can choose to pay 3 colorless mana to play this card face down as a 2/2 morph creature and flip it for its Megamorph cost, which is 1 blue mana. Remember the Invisible Stalker from the Innistrad block? This card is basically that, except it lacks hexproof and has the potential to deal double the damage. This card is sure to be a good card in Limited, as any unblockable creature can help you deal decent points of damage in a limited game. If any new pump spells are released in this set, this card will be that much better in Limited. This card is again another card that probably won't see much play outside of Limited. You could use it to help build budget decks, however, to introduce your friends who don't play Magic into the game. The next card that's been spoiled today is Meringue River Skeleton. The skeleton costs 1 black and 1 colorless mana for a 1/1 skeleton creature. You can pay 1 black mana to regenerate him. He also has the new Megamorph mechanic, which means you can cast him face down as a 2/2 creature for 3 colorless mana and flip him for his Megamorph cost, which is 1 black and 3 colorless. This card is sure to be a good card in Limited, as creatures that can regenerate in Limited always make outstanding blockers and can help you stall for some extra turns to draw into one of your better cards. This is probably just going to be another card that will most likely see no play outside of Limited. You could make a commander deck themed around zombies and skeletons with Nekasar the Mindrazor as your commander and use this card as a filler creature. Also, am I the only one who thinks this card might be the Meringue River Prowler from Fate Reforged? They do look awfully similar. The next card up for review is Dragon Fodder. The card costs 1 red and 1 colorless for a sorcery spell that puts 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens into play. In Limited, this is a decent card as it gives you 2 small blockers and possibly even attackers for either a small offense or defense. In Standard, this card might actually see some play in mono-red burn decks that utilize Goblin Rabblemaster and Hordling Outburst. Turn 2, play Dragon Fodder. Turn 3, play your Goblin Rabblemaster. Turn 4, play Hordling Outburst and attack with your Rabblemaster. Dragon Fodder can also be used in a mono-red Tiny Leaders Goblin deck with Tuk Tuk the Explorer as your commander as a way to produce more goblins that get a bonus from cards such as Goblin Chieftain and Goblin King and act as fuel for cards like Goblin Grenade. The next card up for review is Dragon Lord's Servant. For 1 red and 1 colorless, you get a 1/3 Goblin Shaman that has a pretty neat effect. Its effect states that dragon spells you cast cost 1 colorless mana less to cast. With the printing of this card, we now have the possibility for Dragon Tribal in Standard, which means that if you run this card with Shaman of Forgotten Ways, which we talked about yesterday, it leaves you with a wide range of possibilities and reducing the converted mana cost of your dragons by 3. Turning them from 6 and 7 converted mana cost creatures to 3 and 4 converted mana cost creatures. Even if you're just running this card by itself without the other Shaman, cards like Thunderbreak Regent come out on turn 3, which can help move your game plan along a lot faster. Stormcrag Elemental was another uncommon red card spoiled today. For 1 red and 5 colorless, you get a 5/5 elemental creature with Trample. You can also pay 3 colorless mana to cast Elemental face down as a 2/2 morph creature. You can then turn it up at any time for its Megamorph cost of 2 red and 4 colorless and put a +1/+1 counter on it. Foeraiser Regent is a 4/5 flying dragon for a mana cost of 2 green and 5 colorless mana. Foeraiser Regent has 2 triggered abilities. The first ability states that whenever Foeraiser Regent enters the battlefield that you may have it fight a target creature you don't control. The second ability states that whenever a creature you control fights another creature, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it at the beginning of the next end step. Foeraiser Regent is going to have limited play in the Limited format due to its high mana cost and lack of being able to use his second ability for multiple uses. While the card will play well with previously spoiled cards like Dragon Lord's Servant to reduce the overall mana cost, Dragon Tempest and Thunderbreak Regent, the odds of opening all of the necessary cards for this synergy is very small. For Standard and Modern decks, there isn't a good place currently for this card, Though this set has introduced many dragons that have good playability, the overall meta is not yet there for non-synergic cards to be played. The only combo with this card so far is that with Ulvenwald Tracker and Prey Upon, being able to fight other creatures for just 2 and 1 mana respectively. That being said, there might be a new meta with the right mana ramping and dragon reduction cost spells to make any of the mentioned dragons in our videos being a standard or even modern competitive deck. Foe-Razor Regent, like all the other dragon-type cards, all have a strong home in EDH. There are already decks that are constructed from a dragon commander or utilize the heavy hitting of these creature cards. Salt Road Ambushers is a Hound Warrior 3/3 creature card with a mana cost of 1 green and 3 colorless mana. Like other Megamorph creatures, you can choose to play this card face down as a 2/2 morph creature for 3 colorless mana and flip him for his Megamorph cost of 2 green and 3 colorless mana to give it a +1/+1 counter. He also has a triggered ability that states whenever another permanent you control is flipped face up, if it's a creature, you can put 2 +1/+1 counters on that creature. At pre-release and game day events, this card could have a possible build, as it works amazingly with any sort of morph or megamorph creatures like Aven Sunstriker or Gadol Lurker, making them even bigger. His effect will also be relevant for longer games and will always have targets as already 7 of the new cards spoiled have the new megamorph mechanic. Outside of limited play, this card will be very hard to play consistently in multiple decks in Standard and Modern. You could try and fit him into a red-green monsters deck that uses cards like Whisperwood Elemental with this card, playing a role in making your creatures bigger as they flip. And EDH, this could be a possible new archetype build for EDH, a Morph Megamorph or M&M Mechanic EDH deck. Scaleguard Sentinels is a human soldier creature card with a mana cost of 2 green mana. As an additional cost to cast Scaleguard Sentinels, you may reveal a dragon card from your hand to have Scaleguard Sentinels enter the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. The card also allows for the +1/+1 counter to be placed if you have control of a dragon when it enters the battlefield. The card shown here is the full art version of the card that will be part of the Dragons of Tarkir Game Day event. In limited play, this card will be used with any deck that has a dragon and green mana, the only downside being that unless you pull a lot of dragons, you might not ever get to place a +1/+1 counter on him. Scaleguard Sentinels has too narrow of a purpose for competitive Standard or Modern decks currently playing at tournaments. While a 2/3 for 2 green mana isn't bad in a constructed format, it loses its playability in Standard as well as Modern due to the trigger ability relying on dragon creature cards. Narset Transcendent is the newest and so far the most popular card despite only having been released for a few hours. She costs 1 white, 1 blue, and 2 colorless for a Planeswalker that enters the battlefield with 6 loyalty counters. Her +1 reads, look at the top card of your library. If it's a non-creature, non-land card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. Her -2 reads, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell from your hand this turn, it gains rebound. Her -9 reads, you get an emblem with your opponents can't cast non-creature spells. In Limited, if you can manage to pull off Narset as a card used in your deck, you could have some serious advantage on your side of the field. All her abilities are relevant in Limited and can put you miles ahead of your opponent in the proper deck. If you do manage to activate her -9 ability, your opponent is going to find it very difficult supporting themselves and their creatures. Narset could even see play in Standard in the right deck. As of now, the deck most wanting to run a couple copies for playtesting is any Prowess strategy deck. Her cost, unlike other cards in the set, do not make her unreasonable to play in this kind of deck, and her abilities are all relevant in giving you spells and making your opponent sweat. If your opponent doesn't have a Hero's Downfall in their deck, they're going to have a tough time trying to work out a way of taking Narset out of the game. Narset could be a very good card in a modern deck like Blue-White-Red. Not only does Narset give you extra spells, but when you play them, you get to play any of them again for free on your next turn. Recast cards like Lightning Bolt and Lightning Helix to get out extra damage, or replay cards like Divination to refill your hand. The last spoiler of the day is of a budget and EDH land reprint of Evolving Wilds, which is a land that you tap to sacrifice to search your library for any basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. The artwork on this card has been changed to reflect the Khans of Tarkir block, but I'm loving the new art, as it is very aesthetically pleasing and now represents all 5 colors of the mana wheel. The oasis in the middle of the card represents blue and green, the river of lava reflects black and red, and the desert and sky in the outer portions of the card represent white. It should also be noted that the flavor text on the card has been changed, but still a very accurate flavor text for such a card like Evolving Wilds. It should also be noted that the card we show in this slide is another Tarkir Dragon Fury pre-release promo. In limited play, this card is a mana fixer and is a must to place in your constructed deck at pre-release and game day events. The more that you have, the more you put into your deck to help you play multicolor card strategies. Evolving Wilds has limited play in Standard, but can be considered an excellent budget mana fixer. This card is also a good card for a budget option in Modern as well as a replacement for fetch lands. What are your guys' thoughts on Dragons of Tarkir so far? You loving it, or is it not a favorite of yours? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below, be sure to subscribe, and maybe this time we can actually wait another day for more spoilers.